Every morning, Robert followed the same routine. He'd shuffle into the kitchen, pour himself a steaming cup of coffee, toast a slice of white bread, and maybe grab a spoonful of fruit yogurt. At 72, he wasn't looking for anything fancy, just something quick, something easy. Yet lately, he'd noticed a quiet shift in his body. His legs felt heavier when he stood. His arms tired more quickly when carrying groceries. He blamed aging. After all, wasn't that just part of getting older? But during a routine checkup, his doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Willis, asked him a simple question. "What do you eat for breakfast?" When he answered, she nodded knowingly. "Robert," she said gently, "your breakfast might be part of the problem." He was surprised. "It's just toast and coffee," he said. "Nothing unusual." "That's exactly it," she replied. "Your body wakes up needing fuel, real fuel. And what you're giving it isn't enough to keep your muscles strong." She explained that after a full night's sleep, muscles are in a fragile, nutrient-depleted state. They've spent hours in repair mode without food, and they're waiting for nourishment to continue rebuilding. If they don't get protein and healthy energy sources, the body enters a state called catabolism. Simply put, it starts using its own muscle tissue for fuel. Over time, that leads to a condition called sarcopenia, age-related muscle loss. Robert listened carefully. He didn't like the sound of that word, sarcopenia. It felt heavy, like something slowly stealing his independence. Dr. Willis leaned forward. "The morning is when your body is best at building muscle," she said. "But only if you give it the materials it needs. And that's not toast and coffee. It's protein, healthy fats, complex carbs, even water." That night, Robert sat in his recliner, staring out the window. He thought about the mornings he had wasted, thinking he was doing just fine. He didn't want to feel weak. He didn't want to lose his balance one day and not be able to get back up. He wanted to keep walking, keep gardening, keep living on his terms. The next morning, for the first time in years, he cracked 2 eggs into a pan, sliced a piece of whole grain bread, and added a spoonful of natural peanut butter. He poured a glass of water before he even touched the coffee. It wasn't complicated, but it felt different. It felt like a beginning, and that made all the difference. The second morning of Robert's new routine started with promise. He felt proud cracking his eggs and spreading nut butter on whole grain toast. But as he opened the fridge, his hand hovered over a familiar container, his favorite vanilla yogurt. For years, it had been a staple. Creamy, sweet, and comforting. He paused. How bad could it really be? He thought. Still, Dr. Willis's words echoed in his mind. Watch the sugar, she'd warned. It steals strength more quietly than time. Later that day, Robert sat with his friend Jack on a park bench. Jack, a retired teacher with a sharp wit and a bad knee, was sipping a store-bought smoothie. You ever feel like your legs don't belong to you anymore? Jack asked, frowning. Like they've turned to jelly? Robert chuckled, softly. More often than I'd like. But I've been thinking, maybe it's not just age. Jack raised an eyebrow. Go on. Robert shared what he'd learned from Dr. Willis about sugar and its sneaky effects. Apparently, that sweet stuff messes with your blood sugar, causes crashes, inflammation, and it actually blocks your muscles from rebuilding. Jack stared at his smoothie as if it had betrayed him. No kidding. Yeah, Robert continued. Even stuff that looks healthy, fruit yogurt, cereal, granola bars, they're loaded. I used to think I was eating smart. Turns out I was just keeping myself weak. Jack looked thoughtful. That would explain the foggy brain, the afternoon crashes. I thought it was just bad sleep. It's connected. Robert said. Sugar doesn't just mess with your energy. It affects recovery, coordination, even your balance. Your body ends up stuck in a low-grade state of inflammation. That night, Robert cleaned out his kitchen. He read labels with new eyes, stunned by the long list of hidden sweeteners: glucose, maltodextrin, cane syrup. Even foods labeled as low-fat or natural were filled with sugar. He replaced the yogurt with plain Greek, added fresh berries to his oatmeal, and started flavoring tea with cinnamon instead of sugar. At first, it felt like a sacrifice, but within days, he noticed fewer crashes, less fog. His energy stretched longer into the afternoon. More than that, he felt in control. He realized strength wasn't just built in muscles. It started in choices, and choosing to let go of sugar wasn't about punishment. It was about giving his body a fighting chance. Each small change felt like a promise, a quiet message to himself. You still matter. You still have time to feel strong again. And Robert was listening. It wasn't until the third morning that Robert realized something surprising. He had made it halfway through his new breakfast, eggs, toast, and berries, before remembering his coffee. This small change caught him off guard. For decades, his day didn't start without it. But something about the new routine, adding water first, was shifting his habits more than he expected. He had taken Dr. Willis's advice seriously. Start the morning with a full glass of water, before anything else. At first, it seemed unnecessary. He didn't feel thirsty. Why drink if you're not thirsty? But Dr. Willis explained that as people age, the body's natural thirst signals become unreliable. You may not feel thirsty, she said, but your muscles are already suffering. She described how muscles are made up of nearly 75% water, and how even slight dehydration can make them stiff, slow, and prone to injury. Without enough fluid, nutrients can't travel where they need to go. Waste products build up. Circulation slows. That tightness in Robert's legs when he stood up too fast? That dry feeling in his joints after a walk? It might not be age alone. It might be dehydration. So he tried. A full glass of cool water. First thing. At first, it felt forced. But after just a few days, he noticed something subtle. He didn't feel as sluggish in the mornings. His legs moved more freely. His hands, once stiff while opening jars or tying shoes, seemed looser. It wasn't dramatic, but it was enough to make him curious. He started carrying a small water bottle during his walks with Jack. He kept one on the nightstand. He added lemon slices when he wanted variety. It became part of his day, not a chore, but a companion. He even caught himself choosing water over soda at a family lunch, something he wouldn't have imagined just a week earlier. One evening, while watching the sun set over his quiet neighborhood, Robert thought about all the mornings he'd ignored, what his body truly needed. Coffee was familiar, comforting, but it wasn't nourishment. Water, in its simplicity, had begun to restore something he hadn't realized was missing: a sense of clarity, lightness, and presence in his own body. He smiled and took another sip from his glass. For the first time in years, he wasn't chasing energy with caffeine. He was feeding it gently, patiently, with the most basic, essential thing of all: water. Not flashy, not complicated, just exactly what his body had been waiting for. Robert had always believed that strength belonged to the young. Watching his grandsons sprint through the yard or lift heavy boxes without effort, he'd often shake his head with a smile, thinking, "Those days are behind me." But something inside him had begun to shift. It started with a fall, not his own, but Jack's. One rainy afternoon, Jack tripped on a curb near the library. He wasn't seriously hurt, but getting back up had been a slow, embarrassing process. Later, over tea, Jack said quietly, "It's not the fall that scared me. It's how hard it was to stand again." Robert heard the fear in his voice. That night. He sat in silence, remembering how recently he had used both hands to push himself out of the armchair. He had dismissed it as stiffness, but now he wondered, was it weakness? The next morning, Robert stood in the living room facing a sturdy wooden chair. He placed his hands on his hips, bent his knees, and sat slowly. Then, with effort, he stood up again, without using his arms. It was harder than expected. He repeated it 5 times and sat down, breathing heavily. It wasn't impressive, but it was a beginning. He searched for simple exercises online, wall push-ups, standing balance holds, light lifts using water bottles. No gym, no machines, just his own body. Learning to move with purpose again. Twice a week, he practiced. Sometimes he did more, sometimes less, but he stayed consistent. Within a couple of weeks, he noticed changes. Not dramatic ones. He wasn't leaping over fences, but he no longer grunted when getting out of bed. He felt steadier on stairs. His arms didn't fatigue so quickly while raking leaves. The exercises had become a ritual, a quiet way of telling his body, "I still need you." One morning, Robert stood beside Jack at their usual park bench. Jack was leaning on his cane. Robert, without thinking, bent to tie his shoe and rose smoothly. Jack raised an eyebrow. "You've been working out," Robert smiled. "Kind of. Just enough to keep from falling like you." They laughed, but Jack's expression turned thoughtful. "Maybe I should start too." "You should," Robert said gently. "Not for muscles, for freedom." Because strength, he was learning, wasn't about lifting weights or showing off. It was about walking across the room without fear, climbing stairs without hesitation, living in your body with confidence. And at 72, that felt like power worth pursuing. A week into his new habits, Robert stood in the middle of his kitchen, pantry door wide open, and stared at the rows of packages he once considered essentials. Canned soups, crackers, instant noodles, jars of dressing. Convenient, yes, but now they looked different. Not like food, but like quiet saboteurs hiding in plain sight. He remembered something Dr. Willis had said during their last visit. "You don't have to eat more, Robert. You just have to eat better." At the time, he hadn't understood how much of what he ate, out of comfort, convenience, or habit, was actually working against him. But the more he read and learned, the clearer it became. Some foods didn't just fail to nourish. They actively interfered with healing, muscle repair, and energy. He picked up a package of deli ham. The ingredients list was long and unreadable, filled with nitrates and preservatives. He thought back to the last time he'd made a sandwich. With it, and how heavy and sluggish he'd felt afterward, he put it down. One by one, he sorted through his kitchen, checking labels, tossing what no longer fit his new intentions, and setting aside a list of replacements. White bread was swapped for whole grain. Sugary cereal made way for steel-cut oats. He traded frozen fried meals for roasted vegetables and baked fish. It wasn't a purge born of guilt, but a conscious shift. He wasn't punishing himself. He was protecting something: his energy, his strength, his ability to live on his terms. Grocery shopping became more mindful. He gravitated toward the fresh section. Colorful vegetables, leafy greens, nuts, olive oil, lean proteins. He discovered spices like turmeric and herbs like basil that brought new life to old recipes. Meals became slower, but more satisfying. He even started cooking in batches, freezing soups rich in lentils and chicken, so he'd always have something nourishing on hand. His digestion improved, his joints felt less inflamed, and perhaps most noticeably, the bloating that had followed. Certain meals disappeared. Food no longer left him feeling heavy. It gave him fuel. One afternoon, his daughter Emily stopped by with the grandkids. She opened the fridge and raised an eyebrow. "Dad, where's all your old stuff?" Robert smiled. "I traded it in." For what? For staying upright. He wasn't chasing a perfect diet. He was building a foundation. Every bite, every meal, was a quiet vote for the life he still wanted to lead. And the more he chose real food, the more real he began to feel. Stronger, lighter, more present in his own skin. The bottle of ibuprofen sat quietly on Robert's nightstand, right where it had been for years. He never gave it much thought. A couple of tablets in the morning for his back, maybe another at night when his knees ached. It was part of the background of his life, like his reading glasses or house slippers. But now, something about it felt uneasy. He remembered a conversation with Dr. Willis not long ago. She had asked about his daily routines, and when he mentioned the pills, she grew serious. "Painkillers have their place," she said gently. "But if you're taking them every day, it might be time to look deeper." Robert frowned. "They help me get moving." She nodded. "I understand. But long-term use can quietly get in the way of your muscles healing and growing stronger. Especially drugs like ibuprofen. They block inflammation, yes, but sometimes that inflammation is your body asking for help." He hadn't fully grasped it at first. Inflammation always sounded bad. But she explained that after any movement, even a walk or light strength training, the muscles experience tiny micro tears. The body responds with inflammation as a signal. Rebuild here, grow stronger. When that signal is muted too often by pills, the muscles stop adapting. Recovery stalls. Weakness lingers. That night, Robert sat on the edge of his bed, bottle in hand, debating. His knees were sore from pruning bushes in the yard. Normally, he'd reach automatically. But this time, he paused. Instead, he walked to the kitchen, boiled water, and dropped in a bag of ginger tea. While it steeped, he stretched his legs slowly, breathing deeply. He remembered reading that turmeric could help with discomfort and that Epsom salt baths relaxed muscles. Maybe it was worth trying. Over the next week, he experimented. On painful days, he soaked in warm baths, used heating pads, took slow evening walks. Some days were harder than others. But the surprising thing, as he moved more, the pain lessened. His body seemed to respond to the kindness. Of course, there were moments he still needed the pills, after heavier work, or during weather shifts. But they were no longer automatic. They were a last option, not the first. One morning, Robert stood up without stiffness and realized he hadn't taken any medication in 4 days. It felt like freedom, not just from pain, but from dependence. Healing, he learned, didn't always mean silencing the discomfort. Sometimes it meant listening to it, understanding it, and meeting it with care instead of quick fixes. And in that quiet shift, he found real strength. Sunday morning brought the smell of something warm and familiar to Robert's kitchen. Scrambled eggs with herbs, a slice of toasted rye bread, and a small bowl of cottage cheese with blueberries. It was simple, but everything on that plate had a purpose. Each bite spoke of a lesson learned, a choice made. As he sat down with his breakfast, Robert thought about how far he had come in just a few weeks. For most of his life, protein had never crossed his mind. It was something for athletes, gym-goers, or bodybuilders, Not retired postal workers with gray hair and aging knees. But once Dr. Willis explained how protein needs actually increase with age, something clicked. His body, already losing muscle, faster than it used to, needed extra support just to maintain what it had. She told him the numbers, 1.2 to 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight. For Robert, that meant around 90 to 100 grams a day. He had laughed at the time. "That sounds like a mountain of steak," he joked. But she smiled and showed him how small, steady choices could make a difference. A boiled egg here, a spoonful of Greek yogurt there, a handful of almonds. It wasn't about eating more, it was about eating smarter. And so he began to see meals differently. Breakfast wasn't a ritual of toast and jam. It was an opportunity. Lunch became more than soup or a sandwich. It was a chance to repair, to rebuild. At dinner, he added beans or grilled chicken to his plate. He even tried a smoothie once. Milk, oats, banana, and a scoop of protein powder. It was strange at first, but satisfying in a way he hadn't expected. The effects crept in gently. He felt steadier when standing. His grip improved. A long walk didn't leave him drained like before. Emily noticed too. "You look stronger," she said one afternoon, watching him lift his grandson with ease. He smiled, but didn't boast. Strength, he had come to understand, wasn't about lifting heavy things. It was about lifting yourself out of a chair without wobbling, about carrying groceries without fatigue, about catching yourself if you tripped on the sidewalk. As he sipped his tea, Robert looked at his plate and felt grateful, not just for the food, but for the knowledge, for the quiet power of protein, for the way his body still responded to care. Muscles, it turned out, weren't built in gyms. They were built in moments like this, with intention, consistency, and the belief that even in later years, strength was still his to claim.